Time stood still as the click of the cop's gun echoed, its barrel aimed directly at my wife. In that heart-stopping moment, my mind raced. Do I jump in front of them? Can I talk him down? Should I attempt a daring distraction? What happened next left everyone in shock. But before we dive into this unbelievable story, let me know where you're listening from today. The moving truck rumbled to a stop in front of our new home, a modest two-story nestled in the heart of a suburban enclave. As I stepped out of the car, stretching after the long drive, I glanced over at my wife, Sarah, with her county sheriff's badge clipped to her belt and a determined glint in her eye. She exuded an air of authority that contrasted sharply with the serene surroundings. Ready to start this new chapter? I asked. Attempting to mask my own apprehension, Sarah offered a reassuring smile. Absolutely. Fresh start, friendly neighbors, and a community that looks out for each other. We began the arduous task of unloading boxers, the sun casting a warm glow over. If plucked straight from a real estate brochure, children laughed and played in the distance, and the scent of barbecues wafted through the air. As we carried the last of the boxes inside, a sharp voice interrupted our rhythm. Welcome to the neighborhood. Turning, we were met by a woman in her mid-50s, marching up our driveway with purpose. Her short, platinum blonde hair was styled immaculately, and she clutched a clipboard as if it were an extension of her arm. I'm Karen, the head of our homeowners association, she announced, her tone brisk and businesslike. I like to personally greet all new residents and ensure they're familiar with our community standards. Sarah extended her hand, her grip firm. Pleasure to meet you, Karen. I'm Sarah, and this is my husband. Karen's eyes flicked to Sarah's badge. Before returning to her face, a fleeting shadow of something discomfort crossing her features. A sheriff. Well, that's reassuring, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. We're looking forward to settling in, I interjected, attempting to ease the sudden tension. Karen nodded, her gaze sweeping over our property. I trust you'll find our neighborhood to be a peaceful place, provided everyone adheres to the HOA guidelines. She handed us a thick booklet, the cover emblazoned with community covenants and restrictions. Sarah accepted the tome, flipping through its pages. We'll be sure to review these. See that you do, Karen replied, her smile tightening. We take pride in maintaining the integrity of our community. With that, she turned on her heel and strode away, leaving us standing in the driveway, the weight of the rulebook heavy in Sarah's hands. As the days unfolded, we immersed ourselves in the rhythms of our new life. Morning jogs along tree-lined streets, weekend barbecues with neighbors, and evenings on the porch became our routine. Yet an undercurrent of unease lingered, a sense that beneath the neighborhood's polished exterior lay a rigid structure governed by unspoken rules. Sarah, ever the diligent law enforcement officer, delved into the regulations. Did you know we need approval for any exterior changes to the house? She remarked one evening, eyebrow raised. I chuckled. Guess that means no neon pink shutters. She smirked. Or that we can't park on the street overnight without a permit. I sighed. The initial charm of the neighborhood dimming slightly. Seems a bit restrictive. Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. It's one thing to have guidelines, but this feels more like control. Our sentiments were soon echoed by subtle interactions with Karen. She would appear unannounced, pointing out minor infractions. A trash. Ken left out a few hours too long. Grass that was a shade too tall. Each encounter, though cloaked in politeness, carried an undertone of authority that felt intrusive. One afternoon, as I was planting flowers in the front yard, Karen approached her ever-present clipboard in hand. Those are lovely, she commented, though her tone lacked warmth. I hope you've consulted the approved list of flora for front yard landscaping. I paused, soil staining my gloves. I wasn't aware there was a list. She nodded, tapping her clipboard. Page 42 of the guidelines. We wouldn't want any non-native species disrupting our community's aesthetic. Suppressing a sigh, I forced a smile. I'll make sure to check that. As she walked away. Couldn't shake the feeling that our every move was under scrutiny. Our autonomy slowly being eroded by a set of arbitrary rules. Sarah's frustration mirrored my own. It's as if she's waiting for us to slip up, she confided one evening. And the way she watches me, it's unsettling. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. We'll navigate this together, but something tells me Karen isn't done with us yet. Little did we know, the undercurrents of control and surveillance were just the beginning, setting the stage for a confrontation that would challenge our perceptions of community and authority. The morning sun streamed through the blinds as Sarah and I unpacked the last of the moving boxes. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the air, mingling with the aroma of the coffee brewing in the kitchen. Our new home, nestled within this suburban enclave, was beginning to feel like ours. Finally, I sighed, collapsing onto the couch. All moved in. Sarah joined me, her eyes scanning the room. It's coming together, she agreed, a hint of satisfaction in her voice, though I can't shake the feeling that we're being observed. I raised an eyebrow. Karen, she nodded. Ever since our introduction, I've noticed her making her rounds, always seeming to linger a bit too long near our property. As if on cue, a shadow passed by the window. Peering out, we saw Karen, clipboard in hand, scrutinizing our front yard. Sarah's jaw tightened. That's it, she declared, rising to her feet. Time to address this head-on. Before I could respond, she was out the door, striding toward Karen with the confidence befitting her role as county sheriff. "Good morning, Karen," Sarah greeted, her tone cordial but firm. "Is there something I can help you with?" Karen looked up, feigning surprise. "Oh, Sarah, I was just conducting a routine inspection. We like to ensure all properties maintain our community standards." Sarah crossed her arms. "I appreciate the commitment to the neighborhood's upkeep. However, your frequent visits to our property feel a bit intrusive. We've familiarized ourselves with the HOA guidelines and are committed to adhering to them." Karen's smile tightened. "I'm sure you understand as an officer of the law the importance of rules and their enforcement." Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. "Indeed, I do, and I also understand the importance of boundaries and mutual respect." A tense silence settled between them before Karen finally spoke. "Very well, I'll leave you to your day, but do remember the HOA's role is to maintain harmony within the community." With that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Sarah standing in the driveway, a storm of emotions flickering across her face. That evening, as we sat on the porch, the weight of the day's encounter hung between us. "Do you think she'll back off?" I asked, breaking the silence. Sarah took a sip of her tea, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I hope so, but something tells me this isn't the last we'll hear from Karen." As the stars began to dot the night sky, we resolved to stand our ground, unaware of the storm that was brewing just beyond the horizon. By the morning, the neighborhood was stirring to life. Joggers passing by, children waiting for the school bus, and sprinklers rhythmically watering pristine lawns. Yet beneath this veneer of suburban tranquility, an undercurrent of tension was steadily rising. Sarah emerged from the house, her uniform crisp, badge gleaming in the sunlight. She joined me, her expression contemplative. "Morning," I greeted, handing her a cup. "Morning," she replied, taking a sip. "I've been reviewing the HOA guidelines again. Did you know there's a regulation about the color of window treatments?" I raised an eyebrow. "You're kidding." She shook her head. "Nope, they must be neutral tones that complement the community's aesthetic." I sighed, the weight of the HOA's omnipresence pressing down on me. It's like living in a dollhouse where every detail is micromanaged. Before Sarah could respond, a sharp knock echoed from the front door. We exchanged a glance, a silent understanding passing between us. Setting our cups down, we approached the door together. Opening it, we were met with the familiar sight of Karen, the self-appointed enforcer of the HOA, her ever-present clipboard clutched tightly. Beside her stood a man we hadn't seen before. Tall, broad-shouldered with a stern expression and a security badge pinned to his chest. "Good morning," Karen began, her tone saccharine yet laced with authority. "I hope we're not interrupting." Sarah's posture straightened instinctively. "Karen, to what do we owe the pleasure?" Karen's eyes flicked to her companion. "This is Mr. Daniels, our newly appointed HOA security officer. We're here to address some concerns regarding your property." Daniels nodded curtly. "Ma'am, sir." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Concerns. We've been diligent in adhering to the guidelines." Karen's smile didn't waver. "It's come to our attention that your lawn height exceeds the permitted length by approximately half an inch. Additionally, your trash bins were observed being brought in several hours past the designated time frame." Sarah's jaw clenched. Half an inch and a few hours. Are these really pressing issues? Daniel stepped forward, his presence imposing. "The rules are in place to maintain order and harmony within the community. Compliance ensures everyone's enjoyment of the neighborhood." I could see Sarah's patience wearing thin. "We understand the excessive." Karen's eyes narrowed slightly. "We apply the rules uniformly to all residents. Exceptions lead to chaos." Sarah took a deep breath, reining in her frustration. "Noted. We'll ensure our lawn is trimmed to the exact specifications and the trash bins are promptly retrieved." Karen's smile returned, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Wonderful. We appreciate your cooperation." As they turned to leave, Daniels paused, his gaze lingering on Sarah. "As a law enforcement officer, I'm sure you understand the importance of upholding regulations." Sarah met his stare, unflinching. "I also understand the difference between enforcing laws and overstepping boundaries." A tense silence hung in the air before Daniels gave a nod and followed Karen down the driveway. Closing the door, Sarah exhaled slowly. "This is getting out of hand." I nodded in agreement. "They're watching our every move." Sarah's eyes hardened with resolve. "Then, it's time we watch back." Little did we know, the storm was only beginning to gather, and the facade of our peaceful neighborhood was about to crumble, revealing the darkness lurking beneath. The evening air buzzed with anticipation as neighbors gathered in the community center for the monthly HOA meeting. The room, usually sparsely populated, was now filled to capacity, a testament to the growing unrest within our neighborhood. Sarah and I exchanged glances, sensing the collective frustration that had been simmering beneath the surface. Karen stood at the front, her ever-present clipboard in hand, exuding an air of authority. Beside her loomed Daniels, his imposing figure a silent reminder of the HOA's newfound muscle. The murmur of conversations hushed as Karen cleared her throat. "Good evening, everyone," she began. her voice saccharine yet firm. As we commence our meeting, I'd like to address some recent concerns regarding adherence to our community standards. A hand shot up from the back. Mrs. Thompson, an elderly resident known for her meticulous garden, stood, her face flushed with indignation. "Karen," she began, voice trembling, "I've lived here for over 20 years, always following the rules. But this past month, I've received 3 citations for trivial things. A flower pot slightly out of place, a wind chime deemed too loud. This is madness." A chorus of agreement rippled through the room. Karen's smile tightened. "Mrs. Thompson, our guidelines are in place to ensure the harmony and aesthetic of our community. Consistency is key." Sarah stood her badge, catching the overhead light, drawing the room's attention. "Karen, while we all appreciate the importance of community standards, there's a growing sentiment that the HOA's recent actions border on harassment. The frequency and nature of these citations feel less like maintenance and more like intimidation." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting that the HOA is overstepping its bounds?" Sarah met her gaze unwaveringly. "I'm stating that the residents feel targeted and uneasy in their own homes. Our community thrives on mutual respect, not fear." Daniels shifted beside Karen, his presence a looming shadow. "The rules apply to everyone, regardless of profession or tenure," he interjected, his voice a low rumble. Sarah's eyes flicked to him, her expression calm but resolute. "Enforcement should be fair and just, not wielded as a tool for control." The room held its breath as the tension thickened. Finally, Mr. Alvarez, a retired teacher, spoke up. Perhaps its lips pressed into a thin line. "Duly noted," she said curtly. "We'll take these concerns under advisement." As the meeting adjourned, neighbors clustered in small groups. Palpable, a collective call for change. Sarah and I walked home in silence. That would test the very fabric of our community. The sun had long set, casting our neighborhood in a cloak of darkness. Sarah and I were unwinding in the living room, the soft hum of the television providing a soothing backdrop to our evening. The events of the recent HOA meeting lingered in our minds, but we found solace in the quiet moments together. A sudden, sharp knock at the door shattered the tranquility. Sarah exchanged a weary glance with me. Before rising to answer, as she opened the door, the porch light illuminated Karen's familiar figure, her expression taut with barely concealed irritation. Beside her stood Daniels, the so-called HOA security officer, his imposing frame casting a long shadow over our threshold. "Karen, Daniels," Sarah greeted, her tone neutral but edged with caution. "It's quite late. What brings you here?" Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. "We've received reports of ongoing violations at your property," she stated, her voice clipped. "Specifically unauthorized modifications to your backyard fence." I stepped forward, confusion knitting my brow. "That's news to us. We've made no changes to the fence since moving in." Daniel's hand rested conspicuously near his hip, where a holstered firearm gleamed under the porch light. "We need to inspect the premises," he asserted, his tone leaving little room for negotiation. Sarah's eyes narrowed, her posture shifting subtly into one of authority. "Unless you have a warrant or official documentation from the HOA, you have no right to enter our property uninvited." Karen's face flushed with indignation. "As members of this community, it's your duty to comply with HOA regulations and inspections." Sarah took a deliberate step forward, placing herself between me and our uninvited guests. "And as a law enforcement officer, I know my rights and the limits of your authority." The tension crackled in the air, a palpable standoff on our doorstep. Daniel's fingers inched closer to his weapon, his gaze locked onto Sarah. Time seemed to stretch, each second heavy with unspoken threats. In a blur of motion, Daniels drew his firearm. Time seemed to stop as he aimed it at Sarah. "Step aside, ma'am," he commanded, his voice a low growl. My heart pounded in my chest, fear surging through my veins. Do I jump in front of them? Can I talk him down? Should I attempt a distraction? But Sarah remained unflinching, her hands slowly rising to shoulder height, a universal gesture of de-escalation before I could even act. "Daniels," she said calmly, her voice steady, "you're making a grave mistake." Karen's eyes widened in shock, her gaze darting between Sarah and Daniels. "Put the gun down, Daniels," she urged, her earlier bravado crumbling. Daniels' grip faltered, uncertainty flickering across his face. Seizing the moment, Sarah took a measured step forward. "I'm Sarah, the county sheriff," she declared, her tone commanding. "You're threatening a law enforcement officer on her own property. Lower your weapon now." The weight of her words hung in the air. Daniel's eyes widened in realization, his bravado evaporating. With a shaky breath, he lowered his gun, his hands trembling. The distant wail of sirens pierced the night, a sound both reassuring and ominous. Within moments, patrol cars screeched to a halt in front of our house, uniformed officers spilling out and swiftly disarming Daniels. Karen stood frozen, her complexion pale as she watched her associate being handcuffed and led away. Her earlier confidence had dissolved, leaving behind a figure diminished and exposed. An officer approached Sarah, concern etched on his face. "Sheriff, are you all right?" She nodded, exhaling a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I'm fine, thanks to your prompt response. As the adrenaline ebbed, I reached for Sarah's hand, intertwining our fingers. The night had unveiled the depths of the HOA's corruption, but it had also solidified our resolve. The facade of our idyllic neighborhood had been shattered, revealing the rot beneath. But in that moment, standing together amidst the flashing lights and murmured conversations, we knew we had the strength to confront whatever came next. The aftermath of the night's confrontation left our neighborhood in a state of shock. The revelation that Daniels was an imposter, posing as a security officer, sent ripples of disbelief through the community. Sarah's decisive action had not only protected our family, but also unveiled a web of deceit that threatened the very fabric of our suburban enclave. The following morning, Sarah and I sat at our kitchen table, the weight of the previous night's events pressing heavily upon us. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee did little to dispel the tension that lingered in the air. We need to inform the community, Sarah stated, her voice resolute. They deserve to know the truth about Karen and Daniels. I nodded in agreement. But how do we ensure they believe us? Karen has held sway over this neighborhood for years. Sarah's eyes hardened with determination. We present them with undeniable evidence. It's time to pull back the curtain on this charade. That evening, an emergency HOA meeting was convened. The community center buzzed with murmurs as concerned residents filled the room, their faces etched with curiosity and apprehension. Karen sat at the front, her demeanor strained but composed, while an empty chair beside her served as a stark reminder of Daniel's absence. Sarah stood and addressed the assembly, her presence commanding attention. Thank you all for gathering on such short notice, she began, her voice carrying a blend of authority and empathy. I understand that recent events have raised numerous questions and concerns. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle before continuing. Last night, an incident occurred at our home involving Karen and Mr. Daniels. During this encounter, Daniels drew a firearm on me, prompting his immediate arrest. Gasps rippled through the crowd, eyes widening in disbelief. Sarah pressed on. Upon investigation, it was revealed that Daniels was not a licensed security officer. In fact, he has a criminal background and no legitimate credentials to serve in any security capacity. The room erupted in whispers, neighbors exchanging shocked glances. Karen rose abruptly, her face flushed. This is preposterous. Daniels was vetted and approved by the HOA board. We were acting in the community's best interest. Sarah met Karen's gaze unwaveringly. Were you aware of Daniels' criminal history? Karen faltered, her mouth opening and closing without sound. A voice from the back spoke up. How can we trust the HOA if it's employing unqualified individuals to enforce regulations? Another chimed in. We need transparency. Who else has been given authority without proper vetting? The tide was turning. Residents who had once been passive recipients of the HOA's mandates were now demanding accountability. Sarah took a step forward. It's imperative that we, as a community, reassess our leadership and the processes by which decisions are made. We must ensure that those in positions of authority are acting in our collective best interest, with integrity and transparency. Karen's shoulders slumped, the facade of control slipping away. Mr. Alvarez, the retired teacher, stood. I propose we hold a vote to reconstitute the HOA board and establish a committee to review our current policies and leadership. A chorus of agreement echoed his suggestion. Karen's eyes darted around the room, searching for support, but found none. The community had awakened, no longer willing to be subjected to unchecked authority. As the meeting adjourned, neighbors approached Sarah and me, expressing gratitude and solidarity. The events of the past days had ignited a collective resolve to reclaim the integrity of our neighborhood. Walking home under the starlit sky, Sarah squeezed my hand. This is just the beginning, she murmured. I nodded, a sense of hope blooming amidst the remnants of turmoil. Together, we had confronted deception and emerged stronger, ready to rebuild the trust that formed the foundation of our community. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open amidst a clutter of documents and notes. Her eyes sharp, with determination, scanned the screen as she pieced together the fragments of a troubling puzzle. I've been digging into Daniel's background, she began, her voice cutting through the silence. Turns out he's got a history of fraud and impersonation. No legitimate security credentials whatsoever. I leaned against the counter, the weight of her words sinking in. So Karen brought a known fraudster into our community's leadership. That explains a lot. Sarah nodded, her fingers typing rapidly. But it goes deeper. I've cross-referenced financial records and found discrepancies in the HOA's expenditures. Funds allocated for community projects have been siphoned off into accounts linked to Karen and Daniels. The revelation hung heavy between us. Our suspicions were no longer just gut feelings. They were substantiated by hard evidence. We need to act on this, I said, determination rising within me. But how do we proceed without tipping them off? Sarah's eyes met mine, a steely resolve reflecting in them. We gather irrefutable proof and present it to the community and law enforcement. It's time to dismantle this facade. Over the next few days, we worked tirelessly compiling documents, financial statements, and testimonies from other residents who had experienced undue pressure or questionable fines from the HOA. The more we uncovered, the more intricate the web of deceit appeared. One evening, as we pored over the final pieces of our dossier, a knock echoed through the house. Opening the door, we found Mr. Alvarez, the retired teacher, standing there, his expression a mix of concern and determination. "I've heard whispers about what you're doing," he said, stepping inside. "I want to help. Karen's grip on this community has gone unchecked for too long." Grateful for the support, we shared our findings with him. His insights into the community's history and dynamics proved invaluable, adding depth to our understanding of the HOA's operations. As our case solidified, we coordinated with local law enforcement, ensuring that our actions were within legal bounds and that the evidence would hold up under scrutiny. Sarah's position as county sheriff lent credibility to our efforts, but we knew the importance of transparency and due process. The stage was set for a community-wide meeting, one that would expose the corruption and pave the way for reform. The weight of anticipation was palpable, but so was the collective resolve to reclaim our neighborhood. Little did we know, the revelations to come would not only challenge our perceptions, but also test the very fabric of our community's unity. Word had spread about the emergency meeting called to address the unsettling revelations surrounding the HOA's leadership. Sarah stood at the front, a projector casting documents onto a screen behind her, each slide a damning piece of evidence. "Thank you all for coming," Sarah began, her voice steady and authoritative. "Over the past weeks, we've uncovered significant discrepancies in the HOA's financial activities, implicating key members and fraudulent practices." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Sarah detailed the findings. Unauthorized expenditures, inflated repair bills, and funds siphoned into personal accounts. The evidence was irrefutable. "These actions aren't just breaches of trust," Sarah continued. "They're criminal offenses that have compromised the integrity of our community." Karen, seated among the attendees, shifted uncomfortably, her usual composure unraveling under the weight of the accusations. She stood abruptly, drawing the room's attention. "This is a witch hunt," she exclaimed, her voice tinged with desperation. "You're blowing things out of proportion without concrete proof." Sarah met her gaze unwavering. "The documents speak for themselves, Karen. Moreover, we've involved law enforcement to ensure an impartial investigation." As if on cue, Officer Martinez, a respected member of the local police department, stepped forward. "After reviewing the evidence presented by Sarah and corroborating with our own findings, we have sufficient grounds to proceed with legal action against those involved." The room fell into a stunned silence. Neighbors exchanged glances, the betrayal by their trusted leaders sinking in. Mr. Alvarez, the retired teacher, rose from his seat. "We trusted you, Karen. We entrusted our homes, our community, to your leadership. How could you betray that trust?" Karen's facade crumbled. She opened her mouth to respond, but found no words. Instead, she lowered her head and quietly exited the room, leaving behind a community grappling with the aftermath of her actions. In the days that followed, the HOA board underwent a complete overhaul. New transparent practices were implemented and safeguards were put in place to prevent future misconduct. The community, though shaken, emerged stronger and more united, determined to rebuild the trust that had been broken. As Sarah and I walked through the neighborhood one evening, we noticed subtle changes. Neighbors engaging in open dialogues, communal spaces being revitalized, and a renewed sense of camaraderie. The ordeal had been arduous, but it had also ignited a collective resolve to foster a community rooted in integrity and mutual respect. And as the sun set, casting a warm glow over our homes, we felt a renewed hope for the future, a future we would build together, stronger and more resilient than before. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as community members filled the gallery, their faces a mixture of anger and betrayal. Karen sat at the defense table, her once commanding presence diminished, while Sarah took her place among the prosecution's witnesses, embodying the community's quest for justice. The judge entered, commanding silence. "We are here to address the charges against Karen Thompson, including fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Prosecution, you may call your first witness." The district attorney stood. "Your Honor, we call Sarah Mitchell to the stand." Sarah approached confidently, swearing the oath before taking her seat. "Mrs. Mitchell," the DA began, "as county sheriff and a resident of the community, can you describe your interactions with the defendant regarding HOA matters?" Sarah nodded. Karen often enforced HOA regulations with excessive scrutiny, issuing fines for minor infractions. Concerns about her leadership escalated when she introduced Mr. Daniels as the HOA security officer. "And what did you discover about Mr. Daniels?" "Upon investigation, I found that Daniels had a criminal background with no legitimate security credentials. He was impersonating an officer under Karen's direction." The DA presented documents to the court. Exhibit A shows financial records indicating unauthorized transfers from the HOA's accounts to those controlled by Miss Thompson and Miss Daniels. "Did you have any involvement in uncovering these?" Yes, Sarah affirmed. I collaborated with concerned residents to analyze the HOA's finances, revealing significant embezzlement. The defense attorney rose for cross-examination. Mrs. Mitchell, could these financial discrepancies be simple accounting errors? Sarah remained composed. The patterns were consistent and deliberate, pointing to intentional fraud rather than errors. After further testimonies and evidence presentation, the judge addressed the court. Given the substantial evidence, this case will proceed to trial. As the session concluded, Sarah felt a sense of vindication. The community's resilience had brought them to this pivotal moment. Standing united against corruption, the path ahead promised challenges, but together they were ready to restore integrity to their neighborhood. The courtroom was thick with anticipation as the jury filed back in, their expressions unreadable. Karen sat at the defense table, her hands clasped tightly together while the community members filled the gallery, their collective breath held in suspense. The judge addressed the jury foreperson. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson stood, a solemn nod confirming, "We have, Your Honor, please proceed." The foreperson cleared their throat. In the case of the state versus Karen Thompson on the charge of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, we find the defendant guilty. A collective murmur swept through the gallery, a mixture of relief and vindication. Karen's face paled, her eyes fixed on a distant point, absorbing the weight of the verdict. The judge nodded. "Thank you, members of the jury, for your service. Sentencing will be scheduled at a later date. Court is adjourned." As the gavel struck, signaling the end of the trial, Sarah turned to me, a mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction in her eyes. The battle had been arduous, but justice had prevailed. Outside the courthouse, neighbors gathered, exchanging sentiments of relief and renewed hope. The ordeal had tested the community's resilience, but it had also strengthened their bonds, reaffirming their commitment to integrity and mutual respect. Karen was led away in handcuffs, a stark reminder of the consequences of betrayal and corruption. The neighborhood could now begin the healing process, rebuilding on a foundation of trust and transparency. As Sarah and I walked home hand in hand, the evening air felt lighter, the shadows of the past beginning to dissipate. The path ahead was clear, illuminated by the collective resolve of a community that had faced adversity and emerged stronger. In the aftermath of the HOA scandal, our neighborhood stood at a crossroads. The exposure of corruption had left a void in leadership and a community grappling with disillusionment. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, a collective determination emerged to restore integrity and unity. Sarah and I recognized the need for proactive steps. We collaborated with neighbors to establish an interim committee dedicated to rebuilding trust, ensuring transparency, and laying the groundwork for a revitalized homeowners association. One evening, we gathered in the community center for our first meeting. The room buzzed with a mix of apprehension and hope as residents filled the seats. Sarah stood at the front, her presence commanding attention. "Thank you all for coming tonight. We've been through a challenging period, but together we have the opportunity to rebuild and create a community we can all be proud of." Mr. Alvarez, the retired teacher, raised his hand. "Transparency has been a major issue. How do we ensure that moving forward decisions aren't made behind closed doors?" I nodded in agreement. "That's a valid concern. One proposal is to implement regular financial audits and make all records accessible to residents. Additionally, meeting minutes will be promptly shared and decisions will be made collectively rather than in isolation." Mrs. Chen, a longtime resident, spoke up. "What about the emotional toll this has taken on our community? Neighbors have been divided and trust is at an all-time low." Sarah responded with empathy. "Rebuilding relationships is crucial. We plan to organize community-building activities, weekend potlucks, volunteer-driven beautification projects, and support groups for those who feel particularly affected. These initiatives can help mend frayed relationships and reinforce the bonds that make our neighborhood more than just a collection of houses." A younger resident, Jake, chimed in. "How do we prevent future abuses of power? We don't want to find ourselves in this situation again." I addressed his concern. "Implementing safeguards is essential. We're proposing measures such as term limits for board members and the establishment of subcommittees to oversee specific aspects like maintenance, events, and compliance. This distributes responsibility and prevents the concentration of power." The discussions continued with residents voicing concerns, sharing ideas, and volunteering for various initiatives. The atmosphere gradually shifted from one of apprehension to one of collaborative determination. As the meeting concluded, Sarah looked around the room, a hint of a smile on her face. "This is just the beginning. Rebuilding trust won't happen overnight, but with each step we take together, we're moving closer to the community we all envision." The room echoed with murmurs of agreement, a collective acknowledgement of the journey ahead. The path wouldn't be easy, but united in purpose, we were ready to face the challenges and build a stronger, more connected neighborhood. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah and I stood side by side, surveying the fruits of our collective labor. The once divided community now thrived with renewed unity and purpose. "It's incredible how far we've come," I remarked, watching children play in the freshly renovated park, their laughter echoing through the air. Sarah nodded, her eyes reflecting both pride and contemplation. Indeed, but the true test lies in maintaining this harmony. We've built a foundation. Now, we must ensure it stays this way. As the evening breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers from our communal garden, neighbors gathered for the inaugural sunset social, an event born from our collective desire to foster connection. Mr. Alvarez raised a glass, his voice carrying the weight of experience and hope. To resilience, unity, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. May we always remember the strength found in togetherness. A chorus of agreement followed, glasses clinking in harmonious celebration. As the stars emerged, painting the sky with their brilliance, Sarah leaned in close. We've turned the page on a dark chapter, but the story of our community continues. Let's ensure it's one worth telling.